Jake Morrison stood at the window of his small room on Nexus Prime, watching the alien ships move like glowing dots across the dark sky. The space station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth, and it served as the home for the Galactic Council. 12 different alien species lived and worked here, making decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. Jake was a captain in the Earth Defense Force, but right now he felt more like a visitor at a party where nobody wanted him around. The other species looked at humans with the same expression his grandmother used to make when she found a bug in her soup. It was a look that said humans were disgusting and strange. The problem was simple but embarrassing. Humans cried. When? They were sad, happy, angry, or scared. Water came out of their eyes. The alien species found this revolting and primitive. They had their own ways of showing emotion, but none of them involved leaking bodily fluids. Lisa Park knocked on his door and entered without waiting for an answer. She was the expedition's expert on alien biology, and she had been studying the other species for months. Lisa was small and quiet, but she had a sharp mind that could solve problems others couldn't even see. The council meeting is in an hour, she said, sitting down on the chair across from his bed. Are you ready for this? Jake turned away from the window and looked at her. Lisa's eyes were red and puffy. She had been crying again, probably after reading another report about how the aliens viewed humans as defective. As ready as I can be, Jake said, though I don't think it matters what I say. They've already made up their minds about us. Lisa nodded sadly. I've been studying their biology for months now. The Zephyrians communicate by changing the colors of their skin. When they're happy, they glow bright blue. When they're angry, they turn red. The Krolix make musical sounds that can travel for miles. The Vorthic release different smells to show how they feel. And we leak salt water from our eyes, Jake said with a bitter laugh. No wonder they think we're broken. That's not the worst part, Lisa continued. I've been monitoring their private communications. They don't just think we're strange. They think we're dangerous. They believe that our crying might be contagious, like a disease. Jake sat down on his bed and put his head in his hands. The weight of representing all of humanity was crushing him. If he failed today, Earth would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy forever. No more trade, no more shared technology, no more hope of joining the galactic community. Tell me about the other species again, he said. I need to understand what we're up against. Lisa pulled out her tablet and began reading from her notes. The Zephyrians are the oldest members of the Council. They've been traveling between stars for over 10,000 years. They value logic and efficiency above everything else. To them, emotions are just chemical reactions that should be controlled and regulated. She swiped to the next page. The Krolix are warriors, but they fight with music and sound. They believe that harmony in battle leads to victory. They see our crying as a sign of weakness and disorder. What about the Vorthic? Jake asked. They're the diplomats of the galaxy. They use scent to communicate complex ideas and emotions, but they only release pleasant smells during official meetings. They think our tears are a form of biological pollution. Jake stood up and walked to his small mirror. He looked tired and worried. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hair was messy from running his hands through it. He wondered if this was how the last human ambassador to the galaxy would be remembered. There's something else, Lisa said quietly. I've been analyzing the data from our exploration missions. There are strange energy readings at the edge of known space. Something big is moving out there, something that doesn't match any known species. How big? Jake asked. Big enough to be a threat to everyone, not just humans. But when I tried to share this information with the Council, they dismissed it. They said humans were probably just misreading their instruments because of their emotional Instability. A soft chime sounded from the wall speaker, followed by a mechanical voice. All council members and representatives please report to the main chamber. The session will begin in 30 minutes. Jake straightened his uniform and checked his appearance one more time. The blue fabric was clean and pressed, with Earth's symbol on the chest. A small planet with swirling white clouds, surrounded by stars. It looked so peaceful and beautiful, nothing like the complicated mess that humans had made of their world. Lisa stood up and walked to the door. Jake, whatever happens in there, remember that you're not just representing Earth. You're representing the idea that being different doesn't make you wrong. They walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime together, passing groups of aliens, who stopped their conversations to stare at the humans. Jake tried to keep his head up and his shoulders straight, but he could feel their eyes on him like a physical weight. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in a circle around. A central platform. Each species had their own section, designed to accommodate their unique biology. The Zephyrians sat in chairs that pulsed with soft light. The Krolix had platforms that amplified their musical speech. The Vorthic had enclosed booths with air, filtration systems for their scent communication. The human section was simple and plain, just 2 chairs and a small table. Jake and Lisa took their seats and waited for the session to begin. Admiral Pete Collins appeared on the communication screen from Earth. He was an old man with gray hair and kind eyes, but today he looked worried and tired. He had been fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy for years, and Jake knew this might be his last chance. Captain Morrison, the Admiral said through the screen, "The fate of our species rests in your hands today. Make us proud." The Council. Chamber fell silent as the session began. The Zephyrian leader, a tall being with skin that shifted between blue and purple, stood up to address the gathering. "We are here today to make a final decision about the human species," the Zephyrian sighed. "For 2 years, we have observed their behavior and studied their biology. We have concluded that their emotional leakage represents a threat to galactic stability." Jake felt his heart racing. This was it. The moment that would determine humanity's future. "The humans claim that their crying is natural and harmless," the Zephyrian continued. "But we have seen how this behavior spreads. Other species begin to exhibit similar symptoms after prolonged contact with humans. This cannot be allowed to continue." A Krolix representative stood up, its body humming with low musical tones. "We have analyzed human military records. Their soldiers cry during battle. Their leaders cry during important decisions. How can we trust beings who cannot control their basic biological functions?" The Vorthic diplomat released a cloud of yellow scent that Jake's translator identified as disgust. "Human emotional discharge has contaminated 3 diplomatic meetings. We can no longer guarantee the safety of our own personnel during negotiations." Jake stood up, knowing that this was his moment to speak. He looked around the chamber at all the alien faces staring at him with mixtures of curiosity, disgust, and pity. "You're right," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Humans do cry. We cry when we're sad, when we're happy, when we're angry, and when we're afraid. We cry at weddings and funerals. We cry when we watch movies and when we read books. We cry when we're alone and when we're with others." He paused, feeling the weight of every word. "But you're wrong about one thing. Our tears aren't a sign of weakness or disease. They're a sign of strength. They're proof that we feel deeply and care strongly about the things that matter to us." The chamber erupted in various forms of alien disapproval. Lights flashed, musical discord filled the air, an unpleasant sense wafted through the ventilation system. But Jake wasn't finished. He had one more card to play, one last chance to save his species. And in the depths of space, something ancient and hungry began to move toward the light of civilization. 3 months had passed since the Council gave humanity their final warning. Jake Morrison now commanded a patrol ship called the Defiant, flying through empty space far from the important trade routes. The Council had made it clear that humans were no longer welcome at diplomatic meetings or major space stations. Jake stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars through the main window. His crew was small but loyal. Ben Hayes sat at the navigation station, his fingers moving quickly over the control panels. Corinne Foster worked in the engine room below, keeping their old ship running with spare parts and determination. Lisa Park had her own laboratory where she continued studying alien biology, even though the Council no longer wanted her reports. "Captain," Ben called out, "we're receiving a strange signal from the Kepler system. It's very weak and breaking up." Jake walked over to Ben's station and looked at the readings on the screen. The signal was unlike anything he had seen before. It seemed to pulse and shift like something alive. "Can you clean it up?" Jake asked. Ben worked at his controls for several minutes before shaking his head. "I can make it a little clearer, but there's something wrong with it. It's like the signal itself is damaged." Lisa came up from her lab, carrying her tablet and looking worried. "Jake, I've been monitoring the quantum readings from the edge of our scanning range. Something very large is moving out there. The energy signatures don't match any known species." "How large?" Jake asked. "Large enough to be a fleet of ships, or maybe something even bigger. The readings are getting stronger every day, which means whatever it is, it's getting closer." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. "Have you reported this to the Council?" Lisa nodded sadly. "I tried. They said my data was probably wrong because humans can't be trusted to operate scientific equipment properly. They think our emotions interfere with our ability to think clearly." Corinne's voice came through the ship's communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I'm picking up some kind of emergency broadcast. It's coming from the Krolix mining station at Kepler 442. Put it through the main speakers." Jake ordered. The bridge filled with horrible sounds. There was screaming and what sounded like metal being torn apart. But underneath it all was something else, something that made Jake feel sick and afraid without knowing why. Then the sound stopped and a voice spoke. It was not human or Krolix, or any species Jake knew. It spoke in every language at once, somehow managing to be understood by everyone who heard it. "We consume joy. We devour hope. We are hunger itself." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Jake looked at his crew and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. "Ben, set course for the Kepler system. Maximum speed." "Sir, that's outside our patrol area. The Council specifically ordered us to stay away from important systems." Jake turned to face his navigation officer. "Ben, if I'm right, the Council's rules won't matter much longer. Something just attacked a Krolix mining station, and I don't think they're going to stop there." The Defiant turned toward the Kepler system and jumped into hyperspace. The journey would take 2 days, but Jake had a feeling they were all ready. Too late to help anyone at the mining station. Lisa spent the trip analyzing the strange transmission. She played it over and over, studying the voice patterns and the background sounds. What she found made her more worried than before. "Jake," she said, entering the bridge on the second day of their journey, "I've been analyzing that transmission. The voice isn't coming from any kind of biological vocal cords. It's being generated by some kind of energy field that can manipulate sound waves directly." "What does that mean?" Ben asked. "It means we're dealing with something that can control energy at a fundamental level. And the message itself is interesting. They don't want territory or resources. They want emotions. Specifically, they want positive emotions like joy and hope." Jake felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. "Lisa, What did you say? About the energy readings you've been tracking? They're getting stronger and moving closer to inhabited systems. And when did you first detect them? Lisa checked her notes. About 6 months ago, right around the time the council first complained about human crying being contagious. Karen's voice came through the speakers again. Captain, we're dropping out of hyperspace. The Kepler system is just ahead. Jake looked out the main window as the stars stopped streaking past and became points of light again. Where the Krolix mining station should have been, there was nothing but empty space and a slowly expanding cloud of dark particles. Ben, run a full sensor sweep. Look for any signs of the station or survivors. The scanner results came back quickly. There were no metal fragments, no bodies, no escape pods. The entire mining station and everyone on it had simply vanished, leaving behind only the strange dark cloud. Captain, Lisa said quietly, I'm reading some very unusual energy signatures from that cloud. It's like the matter itself has been changed at a molecular level. Before Jake could respond, their communication system activated. An emergency message was being broadcast across the entire galaxy. Using every frequency and every known language dot, the message came from the Vorthik military headquarters. Their strongest fleet had been sent to investigate the disappearance of the Krolix station. The report was brief and terrifying. This is Admiral Vex of the Vorthik Defense Force. Our investigation fleet has encountered unknown hostile entities. They appear to feed on organic life forms and can drain the will to fight from entire crews. We are falling back to defend our home system. All species are advised to prepare for immediate evacuation of outer colonies. The transmission ended with the sound of something that might have been screaming, or might have been the ship's hull being torn apart. Jake ordered Ben to monitor all communication frequencies while he called a meeting with his crew. They gathered in the small conference room behind the bridge, their faces serious and worried. I think we all know what's happening, Jake said. Something is attacking the galaxy, something that feeds on positive emotions and can make entire civilizations disappear. The question is, what do we do about it? Karen spoke first. We should head back to Earth and warn them. Give humanity time to prepare for whatever's coming. The Council won't listen to us, Ben added. They've made it clear that humans aren't trusted to provide reliable information. Lisa had been quiet during the discussion, but now she looked up from her tablet with a strange expression on her face. I've been thinking about something. These entities feed on positive emotions, right? Joy, hope, the will to live. They drain those feelings from their victims. Yes, Jake said. What are you getting at? Well, what if that's exactly why the Council has been so disturbed by human crying? What if our ability to express negative emotions openly is actually some kind of defense mechanism? Jake felt his heart beat faster. Explain? Think about it. Every other species in the galaxy has evolved to hide or suppress negative emotions. The Zephyrians control their feelings through logic. The Krolix channel everything into harmony. The Vorthik only release pleasant scents during social interactions. But humans cry openly when they're sad or afraid. Karen leaned forward. You're saying that our crying might protect us from these things? I'm saying that maybe our ability to feel and express negative emotions naturally is exactly what these entities can't handle. They feed on hope and joy, but what happens when they encounter a species that's equally comfortable with sadness and fear? Jake stood up and walked to the small window. Outside, the dark cloud that had once been a Krolix mining station continued to expand slowly through space. There's only one way to find out, he said. Ben, set course for the nearest Council world. We need to warn them, whether they want to listen to us or not. And if they won't listen? Karen asked. Jake turned back to his crew, and for the first time in months, he felt something like hope. Then we'll have to show them that sometimes the best way to fight monsters is to embrace the darkness they're afraid of. As the Defiant turned toward the inner systems, none of them noticed the small probe that had been watching them from the edge of the dark cloud. The probe's sensors had recorded everything, especially the strange energy patterns that seemed to surround the humans when they talked about fear and sadness. In the depths of space, ancient minds studied the readings and felt something they had not experienced in millions of years: confusion. These creatures were different from all the others. They welcomed negative emotions instead of fighting them. The hunt would continue. But now the hunters had found something unexpected. Prey that might not be prey at all. The enemy fleet appeared at the edge of the Nexus system like a wound in space itself. Jake Morrison watched from the bridge of the Defiant as dozens of black ships materialized from hyperspace. Their hulls so dark they seemed to absorb the light from nearby stars. "My God," Ben Hayes whispered from his navigation station. "I've never seen anything like them." The ships were wrong in ways that hurt to look at directly. They had no lights, no visible engines, no markings of any kind. They moved through space like living shadows, leaving trails of darkness behind them that made the stars flicker and dim. Lisa Park rushed onto the bridge, her tablet clutched in her hands and her face pale with fear. "Jake, the energy readings are off the charts. These things are pulling energy directly from the space around them. They're not just ships. They're some kind of living technology." The Council's defense fleet was already moving to intercept the invaders. Jake watched as hundreds of beautiful alien warships formed battle lines between the enemy and Nexus Prime. The Zephyrian vessels glowed with brilliant light, their crystalline hulls pulsing with coordinated energy patterns. The Krolix ships hummed with harmonic frequencies that could shatter asteroids. The Vothek fleet released clouds of chemical weapons that could dissolve enemy armor in seconds. "Captain," Karen Foster's voice came through the ship's communication system from the engine room. "The Council is ordering all non-military vessels to retreat to the outer system. They don't want us anywhere near the battle." Jake gritted his teeth in frustration. Even now, facing an enemy that could destroy the entire galaxy, the Council still treated humans like dangerous children who couldn't be trusted near important events. "Ben, take us to the edge of the system, but keep our sensors locked on the battle. We need to see what happens." The first contact between the two fleets was swift and horrifying. The Zephyrian ships opened fire with focused light beams that could cut through the hull of any known vessel. But when the beams hit the dark ships, the light simply vanished, absorbed into the black holes like water soaking into sand. The Krolix tried their sonic weapons next, filling space with harmonics powerful enough to shake planets. But instead of damaging the enemy ships, the sounds were somehow twisted and reflected back at the Krolix fleet. The alien crews began to hear their own voices screaming in terror and pain, sounds that had never been made but felt completely real. "Lisa, are you getting readings on what's happening to the Council fleets?" Jake asked. Lisa stared at her tablet, her hands shaking slightly. "It's impossible, but the enemy isn't just destroying the ships. They're draining something from the crews themselves. Biometric readings are showing massive drops in serotonin, dopamine, and other chemicals associated with positive emotions." On the main screen, they could see the effect spreading through the Allied fleet. The Zephyrian ships began to lose their coordinated light patterns as their crews forgot why they were fighting. Some vessels started firing on their own allies as despair overwhelmed their decision-making processes. The Vorthek fared even worse. Their chemical communication system turned against them as the enemy somehow corrupted their scent-based commands. What should have been orders for attack formations became signals of hopelessness and surrender. Entire squadrons of Vorthek ships simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by artificially induced depression. "Captain," Ben said quietly, The enemy fleet is moving toward Nexus Prime. The Council defense has completely collapsed. Jake watched in horror as the greatest military force in the galaxy was destroyed not by superior firepower, but by having their will to fight systematically removed. Ship after ship went dark as their crews succumbed to overwhelming despair. The communication system suddenly activated with an emergency broadcast from the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. The Zephyrian leader appeared on screen, but its skin was now a dull gray color instead of the usual bright blue. To all surviving vessels, the Zephyrian said in a flat, emotionless voice, the Council officially surrenders to the invading force. All military units are ordered to stand down and prepare for evacuation. The enemy has offered to spare our lives if we do not resist further. The transmission ended, leaving Jake and his crew in stunned silence. The Galactic Council, which had ruled space for thousands of years, had just surrendered after less than 2 hours of battle. "Jake," Lisa said softly, "we need to get out of here. If those things can drain entire fleets of their will to fight, what chance do we have?" But Jake was thinking about something else. Throughout the battle, he had been monitoring the communication frequencies, listening to the final transmissions from the dying ships. And he had noticed something that made his blood run cold. "Lisa, during the battle, did you notice that the enemy never actually destroyed any ships directly?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, they didn't blow them up or tear them apart. They just drained the crews until they gave up. The ships themselves are still intact." Lisa looked at her readings again. "You're right. The enemy fleet is now towing the captured vessels behind them. But why would they want empty ships?" Before Jake could answer, Corinne's voice came through the speakers with panic in her tone. "Captain, the enemy fleet is changing course. They're not heading for Nexus Prime anymore. They're coming straight for us." Jake felt his heart start racing. "How long until they reach us?" "At their current speed, maybe 20 minutes. Jake made a decision that went against every military protocol he had ever learned. Instead of trying to run or hide, he opened a communication channel directly to Earth Command. Admiral Pete Collins appeared on the screen, his face showing the strain of the past few hours. Behind him, Jake could see other Earth Defense Force officers monitoring the battle from their command center. "Captain Morrison, thank God you're alive. We've been watching the battle. The entire Council fleet has been destroyed or captured. You need to get out of there immediately." "Admiral," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest, "I need you to authorize Protocol Broken Heart." The bridge went completely silent. Protocol Broken Heart was something that had been developed in secret by Earth's military psychologists. It was based on Lisa's research into human emotional responses and had never been tested in actual combat. "Captain, you don't understand what you're asking for," the Admiral said. "That protocol is theoretical. We don't know if it will work, and if it fails, you'll be exposing the enemy to humanity's deepest psychological weaknesses. Sir, with respect, the enemy is already heading straight for us. In 15 minutes, we're going to find out what happens when these things try to drain emotions from humans. I'd rather test our theory than just sit here and wait to be captured." Admiral Collins was quiet for a long moment, his face showing the weight of a decision that could affect the future of humanity. Finally, he nodded. "Protocol Broken Heart is authorized. God help us all." The communication ended, and Jake turned to face his crew. Ben was staring at him with wide eyes. Corinne had come up from the engine room and was standing in the doorway, and Lisa was clutching her tablet like a lifeline. "You all heard the Admiral," Jake said. "We're about to try something that's never been attempted before. We're going to let the enemy try to drain our emotions, but instead of fighting it, we're going to give them something they've probably never encountered before." "What's that?" Corinne asked. "Honest human sadness. The kind of deep, processed grief that doesn't break us, but makes us stronger. Lisa activated her research files on her tablet. I've prepared a series of meditation techniques based on Earth's history of trauma and recovery. If my theory is correct, these entities feed on hope and joy, but they might not know what to do with genuine, accepted sorrow. The enemy ships. We're getting closer now, their dark hulls blocking out more and more stars as they approached. Jake could feel something pressing against his mind, a cold presence that tried to reach into his thoughts and pull out everything bright and hopeful. But instead of resisting, Jake did something that no other species in the galaxy had ever thought to try. He opened his mind to the sadness he carried, the grief for friends lost in battle, the sorrow for a universe that seemed determined to reject his people. And for the first time in their long existence, the entities that fed on hope encountered something completely unexpected. A species that had learned to transform pain into strength and sadness into wisdom. The real battle was about to begin. The first enemy ship reached the Defiant like a living shadow wrapping around their hull. Jake Morrison felt the cold presence enter his mind, searching for happiness and hope to consume. But instead of finding the usual feast of positive emotions, the entity encountered something it had never experienced before. Jake was thinking about his childhood dog, a golden retriever named Max, who had died when Jake was 12 years old. He remembered the day they buried Max in the backyard, how he had cried for hours while his parents held him. But he also remembered how that sadness had taught him that loving something meant accepting that you might lose it, and that this knowledge made love more precious, not less. Lisa Parks sat at her station, following the meditation techniques she had developed. She focused on her grandmother, who had died of cancer when Lisa was in college. Lisa remembered sitting by her grandmother's hospital bed, holding her hand as the old woman's breathing grew weaker. The sadness had been overwhelming, but it had also been full of gratitude for all the years they had shared together. Ben Hayes thought about his brother Danny, who had been killed in a shuttle accident 3 years ago. Ben had blamed himself for months, wondering if he could have prevented it somehow. But through therapy and time, he had learned to carry the grief without letting it destroy him. The sadness was still there, but it had become a reminder of how much his brother had meant to him. Karen Foster remembered her daughter Emma, who had been born with a heart condition and lived only 6 months. Karen had cried every day for a year after Emma died. But slowly, she had realized that those 6 months had been filled with more love than many people experienced in a lifetime. The sadness honored Emma's memory instead of destroying it. The entity trying to drain their emotions recoiled in confusion. These humans were not fighting their negative feelings or trying to push them away. Instead, they welcomed the sadness, processed it, and somehow transformed it into something stronger. The darkness that the entity expected to create was already there, but it had been turned into a foundation for hope rather than a weapon of despair. "Captain," Lisa said softly, tears streaming down her face, "the enemy ship is pulling back. Its energy readings are fluctuating wildly." Jake opened his eyes and looked at the main screen. The dark ship that had been pressed against their hull was now floating several hundred meters away, its surface rippling like disturbed water. For the first time since they had appeared, one of the enemy vessels looked uncertain. "Lisa, what's happening to it?" "I think our emotional response is causing some kind of feedback loop in their feeding mechanism. They're designed to consume hope and joy, but we're giving them processed grief instead. It's like trying to digest something that's already been broken down by a different system." More enemy ships surrounded the Defiant, their crews of ancient entities trying to understand what they were encountering. For millions of years, they had fed on the same pattern. They would drain their victims of positive emotions, leaving behind empty husks filled with despair. But these humans seemed to carry their own darkness willingly, and somehow that darkness was immune to their hunger. Karen's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. "Captain, I'm reading some very strange energy patterns from the enemy fleet. It's like they're trying to communicate with each other, but they're confused about something. Jake opened a communication channel to Earth Command. Admiral Pete Collins appeared on the screen, his face tense with worry. Captain Morrison, we're monitoring your situation from here. Are you and your crew all right? We're alive, Admiral. And I think Protocol Broken Heart is working, but not in the way we expected. Explain. Jake looked around at his crew, all of them still crying softly as they held on to their processed grief. The entities can't drain emotions that have already been transformed by acceptance and understanding. Our sadness isn't the raw, destructive kind they're used to feeding on. It's been changed into something else, something that actually makes you stronger. Admiral Collins leaned forward on the screen. Are you saying these things can't hurt humans? I'm saying they don't know what to do with us. We're not like the other species. We don't hide from negative emotions or try to suppress them. We've learned to use them as tools for growth and understanding. Lisa looked up from her readings, excitement mixed with wonder on her face. Jake, the lead enemy ship, is trying to establish direct communication with us. Not the kind they used when they destroyed the Krolik station. This is different. It's almost like they're asking for help. Put it through. The bridge filled with a presence that was vast and ancient and incredibly sad. The voice that spoke was not the horrible, consuming thing they had heard before. It was tired and lost and desperate. We do not understand, the voice said in perfect English. Your darkness feeds itself. Your pain creates strength. How is this possible? Jake stood up slowly, feeling the weight of first contact with an intelligence older than human civilization, because we learned that running from sadness only makes it stronger. We learned to face it, understand it, and let it teach us. Teach? The voice seemed confused by the concept. Pain is to be consumed. Suffering is to be devoured. This is the way of things. Lisa stepped forward, her scientific mind racing with possibilities. You're wrong. Pain can be processed and transformed. Suffering can become wisdom if you're willing to accept it as part of existence instead of something to be eliminated. The presence in their minds shifted, becoming less threatening and more curious. We have consumed the joy of 1,000,000 worlds. We have devoured the hope of countless civilizations. But the hunger never ends. The emptiness never fills. Jake felt a moment of understanding that changed everything. These entities were not evil invaders. They were traumatized survivors, trying to fill a void that could never be filled by consuming what others had. What happened to you? Jake asked gently. What created this hunger? The voice was quiet for a long moment before answering. Our universe died. Everything we knew, everything we loved, was consumed by entropy and darkness. We escaped into this reality, but we brought the emptiness with us. We thought if we could consume enough joy, enough hope, we could replace what we had lost. Koren's voice came through the speakers, soft with understanding. But it didn't work, did it? Taking happiness from others didn't give you happiness of your own. No, each world we consumed made the hunger greater. Each civilization we destroyed left us more empty than before. Jake looked at his crew, seeing his own realization reflected in their faces. These beings had never learned what humans had discovered. Through millennia of suffering. That healing came not from avoiding pain, but from accepting it and allowing it to transform you. We can teach you, Lisa said suddenly. We can show you how to process grief instead of trying to eliminate it. Teach us what? How to cry, Jake said simply. How to mourn properly. How to let sadness be what it really is. A bridge between what was lost and what can still be built. The enemy fleet began to change. The dark halls started to show tiny points of light like stars being born in the depths of space. The presence in their minds became warmer, more hopeful, but also more willing to feel the full weight of what had been lost. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient entities that had consumed hope across the galaxy began to weep. Not the destructive tears of despair, but the healing tears of acceptance. And in learning to cry properly, they began to discover that the emptiness inside them could be filled not by taking from others, but by allowing themselves to feel everything they had tried so hard to avoid. The galaxy's greatest predators were about to become its students, learning from the species that everyone had thought was broken and defective. The humans had found their purpose among the stars. They were teachers of the most important lesson in the universe, that sometimes the only way to heal is to let yourself hurt first. 6 months after the first contact with the entities, Nexus Prime had become something no one could have imagined. The great space station now served as the galaxy's first center for emotional healing, where representatives from every species came to learn what humans had always known about processing grief and sadness. Jake Morrison walked through the new therapy wings that had been built onto the station. The corridors were filled with the strangest sight in galactic history: alien beings learning how to cry. Zephyrian diplomats sat in circles with human counselors, their skin flickering between colors as they explored emotions they had suppressed for centuries. Krolix warriors hummed soft, mournful songs that would have been forbidden in their old culture. Vorthak administrators released gentle scents that spoke of loss and acceptance, instead of the artificial happiness they had always projected. Dr. Lisa Park had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies emotional therapy. She now led a team of human psychologists and alien researchers working together to develop new ways of helping traumatized civilizations heal from their wounds. The breakthrough came when we realized that every species had been running from the same thing, Lisa explained to a group of new trainees in the main conference room. They all had different ways of avoiding negative emotions, but the result was the same. The pain never went away. It just got buried deeper. In the center of the station, a special section had been built for the entities that everyone now called the mourners. These ancient beings had spent months learning basic emotional processes that human children understood instinctively. They practiced feeling sadness without trying to consume it, experiencing loss without trying to fill the emptiness by taking from others. Jake visited the mourners often, sitting with them in meditation sessions that combined human techniques with their own ancient memories. The sessions were beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The mourners would share fragments of their lost universe through direct mental contact, showing images of worlds and civilizations that had died billions of years ago. Today, we remember the crystal gardens of Nexthara, one of the mourners said during a session. The voice was no longer the terrible, consuming presence Jake had first encountered. It was gentle and sad and somehow peaceful. The mental image filled Jake's mind. Beautiful structures of living crystal that sang in harmonies as sunlight passed through them. Creatures that looked like flowing water, caring for the gardens with movements that were more like dancing than work. Children playing games that involved creating new crystal formations with their thoughts. "Tell me about the children," Jake said softly. "They were beings of pure joy," the mourner replied. "They could make the crystals bloom with their laughter. When our universe began to die, we tried to save them first, but there was nowhere to run. We watched them fade away as the stars went out one by one." Jake felt tears running down his face as he shared the mourner's memory. But instead of the overwhelming despair he might have expected, there was something else mixed in with the sadness. Gratitude for having known such beauty, even if it was now gone. "The children would be proud of you for learning this," Jake said, "for learning to remember them with love instead of hunger." The mourner's presence shifted, becoming warmer. "You truly believe this?" "I know it. When we love someone and lose them, the love doesn't die. It just changes form. It becomes a way of honoring their memory instead of trying to bring them back. Admiral Pete Collins arrived at Nexus Prime that afternoon, leading a delegation from Earth that included some of humanity's finest teachers, therapists, and philosophers. The old admiral looked tired, but satisfied as he met with Jake in the station's new observation lounge. "Captain Morrison, I have to say this is not how I expected this mission to end when we first sent you here," the admiral said with a smile. Jake looked out the large windows at the incredible sight outside the station. The Mourner fleet hung in space nearby, but their ships were no longer the terrifying black voids they had once been. Now they glowed softly with patterns of light that looked almost like stars being born. Mixed among them were ships from every species in the galaxy, their crews working together on the largest healing project in recorded history. "To be honest, sir, I never expected to become a therapist when I joined the Earth Defense Force. None of us expected any of this. But I'm proud of what you and your crew accomplished. You didn't just save the galaxy from destruction. You showed everyone that our supposed weakness was actually our greatest strength." Ben Hayes joined them at the window, carrying a report from the communication center. "Captain, we're getting updates from across the galaxy. The Krolix have officially changed their military doctrine to include emotional support units. The Zephyrians are teaching their children to express feelings instead of just controlling them. Even the Vorthic are developing new scents that help people process grief instead of hiding from it." Lisa Park arrived with her own report, looking excited and tired at the same time. "Jake, the progress we're seeing is incredible. Species that had been emotionally stagnant for thousands of years are making breakthroughs in weeks. It's like the entire galaxy was waiting for permission to feel." Karen Foster's voice came through the communication system from the Defiant, which was now permanently docked at Nexus Prime as the flagship of the new Therapeutic Alliance. "Captain, the Mourners are requesting another joint session. They want to share more memories from their lost universe, and they specifically asked for you to be there." Jake nodded to his crew and made his way to the Mourner section of the station. The chamber they used for group sessions was unlike anywhere else in the galaxy. The walls were covered with images projected directly from the Mourners' memories, showing glimpses of the universe that had died so long ago. About 50 beings were gathered in the chamber. Humans sat next to Zephyrians, Krolix next to Vorthic, all of them learning from the ancient entities that had once been their greatest threat. The Mourners themselves had taken on a more physical form, appearing as tall, graceful figures made of shifting starlight. "We wish to share the memory of the last day," one of the Mourners announced. "The day our universe finally ended and we were forced to escape into this reality." The mental images that followed were almost too powerful to bear. Jake saw the last stars going dark, the final planets growing cold, the last living beings gathering together to say goodbye to everything they had ever known. But instead of the hopeless despair he had expected, there was something else in the memory. Love, acceptance, a kind of peace that came from knowing they had done everything they could, and that their universe had been beautiful while it lasted. "We spent millions of years running from this memory," the Mourner explained. "We thought if we could consume enough joy from other worlds, we could avoid feeling the sadness of our loss. But you taught us that the sadness was not our enemy. It was our connection to everything we had loved." Jake stood up, feeling the presence of every being in the chamber. "And now we mourn properly. We cry for what we lost, but we also celebrate what we had. And most importantly, we help others avoid the same mistake we made." The session continued for hours, with beings from across the galaxy sharing their own stories of loss and learning. They cried together, laughed together, and slowly healed wounds that some of them had carried for centuries. As Jake walked back to his quarters that night, He passed through the memorial garden that had been built at the center of the station. It contained remembrances from every species and every lost world, including a beautiful crystal formation that the mourners had created to honor their dead universe. At the entrance to the garden was a simple plaque, written in every known language. Jake read the human version, as he had done every night since it was installed. In memory of all that was lost, in celebration of all that was loved, and in hope for all that can still be built. Here we learn that the strength to carry on comes not from avoiding our tears, but from understanding what they truly mean. Jake smiled as he read the final line, the motto that had become the foundation of the new galactic civilization. The humans wept first. Then they taught everyone else it was okay to cry last. The galaxy had learned that healing begins with honest tears, and that the greatest act of courage is not to fight your sadness, but to let it transform you into someone strong enough to help others find their own tears. In the end, humanity's gift to the universe was not technology, or weapons, or even wisdom. It was permission to feel everything, completely and honestly, and to discover that broken hearts, when healed properly, become strong enough to hold the pain of the entire galaxy.